It is a busy day for earnings today. We're going to get back to today's big movers in just a moment. But we want to pause for a moment to bring you a rare interview with Melinda Gates. She has a new book that's out. It's called Moment of Lift. It describes her personal experience as the co-chair of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, donating billions of dollars around the world for the cause of global health, also hearing the stories of women across the economic spectrum. I asked her why she chose now to tell the stories of her own and other women's economic empowerment.
I feel like equality can't wait, and we have this moment in time between the Me Too movement, the number of women who are running for Congress and have gotten in, and yet even with that rate of women running for Congress and the progress we're all excited about, if we still continue at this rate, it's going to be 60 years till we have true equality in Congress. And so I want to make sure we use this moment in time and really make sure we get equality in society.
You know, the reason your book is so powerful is because you use really real people's stories. These are women you've met in your travels around the globe in developing nations. But it's also your story, too. There's a lot of this that is autobiographical. You're a really private person.
I am.
How did you decide to put that in?
Yeah, it was hard. I mean, some of the pieces in the book, I'm incredibly vulnerable, and I think those were the hardest pieces to write. But I felt like I wanted to share my stories because I want people to understand who I am, and I think my story is also the story of millions of women. So, and I wanted to share these voices of the women I've heard from around the world because I learn from them. And so if by sharing their stories, they've called me to action, if my story and their stories can call others to action, then it was worth being more vulnerable in there.
Did you do a lot of soul searching before you actually put a lot of yourself into this?
Absolutely. And the hardest pieces for me to write were the most private parts of the book. Moments in our marriage where I was asking Bill for more equality, or moments where I do talk about abuse that I went through. That was the hardest piece to write. But I felt like in being vulnerable, if I would share those stories, people would understand, you know, abuse, it can happen to absolutely anyone. And I travel the globe, and when I stay long enough in places, it comes out, whether I'm in Silicon Valley, whether I'm in northern India, whether I'm in Senegal or Malawi. Women talk to you about abuse, and one of the reasons it's important to write about that is because it silences women. It silenced my voice. It took away my self-confidence for years, and I wanted to know for women that we have to share our stories, and it's in that sharing that we can actually change society.
You know, you do write pretty honestly about your marriage when you had to take times in your marriage where you were really looking for equality. Equality at the foundation, equality in terms of who does what at home and with the kids. What did Bill think about all that?
Yeah, well, luckily, Bill grew up in a family where his mom was working early when a lot of women weren't. His grandmother actually went to college and played basketball when a lot of people of that generation, women, didn't do that. So he wanted it in theory. But I don't think either of us, when we entered the marriage, really questioned, either one of us, what our roles would be. And clearly, he's running Microsoft. I mean, he has a huge job. But I think even what I expected of myself, we didn't stop and talk about it. So it wasn't until well into the marriage that I realized how much I was doing at home and that I had to name for him, hey, I want to work too. I enjoy working. And if I'm going to be able to do that, you need to take on more work at home.
What was his first reaction to that?
Well, I'm not always elegant in how I bring these things up. He might tell you that sometimes I have my hands on my hips. But I have to say, one of the things I write about in the book is when our oldest daughter, Jen, was beginning kindergarten. We both agreed on the school we wanted her to go to, but it was a good 45 minutes round-trip drive from our house. And I said to Bill, okay, look, we both agree on this, but I can see years ahead in traffic twice a day. I said, how about we wait till she's in 3rd grade? We'll put her closer to home. And he said, no, I think this is really important. And I said, but it's so much time in the car for me. And he said, well, how about, he offered, how about if I drive 2 days a week? And for him, it meant an hour round trip to the school because Microsoft was further away from the school than our home was. And the interesting thing that happened is when he started doing this, about 3 weeks into the school year, another mother sidled up to me and she said, do you see what's going on here? And I said, well, I've noticed more dads are dropping their kids at school, coming into the classroom. And she said, yeah, We went home and told our husbands, if Bill Gates can do it, you can do it.
One of your big focuses at the foundation, and something you write a lot about in this book, is making sure that reproductive rights are something that you think is very important, and vocalizing that and doing something about it. That wasn't an easy decision for you either, because you're Catholic. You grew up in a Catholic household. You went to a Catholic all-girls school, and that draws some fire. How did you reach this decision? Why did you think it's so important?
I was traveling for the foundation. I've had the great privilege of traveling all over the world for 20 years. I'm out in places, low-income countries, at least 3 times a year, talking with families and women. And it wasn't the conversation I was asking about. I'd often be asking about vaccines for their children, which they will tell you are life-saving. But they kept bringing up contraceptives, and they kept saying, why don't I have them? I used to have them. They're no longer at that health clinic. And they would literally say to me, this is a life and death crisis. Like, I can't have another child. I can barely feed the ones I have. And I realized that as a world, we had backed away from it because of religious, particularly the Catholic Church, and political reasons. And yet, if I really was listening in the developing world, and then looking at the data and realizing no country in the world in the last 50 years has escaped poverty without making sure women have access, voluntary access to contraceptives, I thought, okay, if we really are for low-income countries becoming middle income and high income, we have to make sure as a world women have access to contraceptives.
And you're talking about family planning, making sure that you can space your kids out over time, making sure that you can hopefully feed the number of children that you have, and give each of them opportunities along the way, too.
Absolutely. Planning and spacing the births of your children. And we know, I think we take for granted in the United States, I mean, what allowed women to go into the workforce in droves? It was the advent of the pill. And when women can choose to time and space the births of their babies, we know from great research, one of the biggest longitudinal studies in global health, that families are healthier, children are better educated, and families are wealthier if the woman can time and space the births of her children.
You know, you started out just a moment ago talking about vaccinations and how you would talk to women about vaccinating their children. You've seen huge advances as diseases that used to be terrifying have kind of gotten eradicated or almost eradicated in some cases. Do you get frustrated when you see the anti-vax movement in this country and the return of things like measles and mumps that should be preventable?
I get very frustrated because the women I talk to in country after country, let's say in Africa, they will say, I walked 10 kilometers in the heat to get here. You know, they've got a baby on their back and they've got another couple with them, and they're saying, of course I want a vaccine. Like, when I go and ask them about vaccines, they're like, well, of course I want it. It's saving my child's life. So the fact that the U.S., we have forgotten what some of these diseases are like, and that they not only affect our own children, but they affect other people's children or other people whose immune system is down, that's not right. You need to vaccinate your children. It saves lives.
Yeah, we're getting stupider, not smarter on this front. And
we're believing things that aren't true. And I think we're not reading the right information or talking to our pediatrician. He or she knows that vaccines save lives.